Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
This is part 2 of the interviews I recorded at the JCON conference in Germany earlier this month. In this episode we have two main topics, Maven and Code Quality. Let's start with Karl, Heinz, Marbaise and Steve Poole to learn more about the Maven project, the repository, Sonatype and the security impact of dependencies.
My name is Karl Heinz Marbaise. I'm attending this JCON conference because also I'm a speaker here. I'm talking about Apache Maven because I'm the Apache Maven chairman at the moment. So that's one of the reasons. And also, of course, I wanted to meet people and talk about things like that and discuss with other people and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So general discussion about and calling it networking, for example, yeah.
And meeting everyone.
Yes, of course, very important thing, yeah.
Apache Maven. Can we say that Maven is one of the foundations of the Java community?
I would say yes, because based on the knowledge I have at the moment, more or less 60-70% of the Java developers are using that. There are other tools like Gradle or something like that, yes, but I made the experience that many people prefer Maven for some experiences, for some reasons, and others do prefer some other tools, yes, of course. And I think that the distribution of Maven is very large in the meantime, because over the time it had been becoming very popular over the time. Some people blaming about that because complaining about things. Yes, of course, there are problems in there, no doubt about that. But in the meantime, it showed that the simplicity in some ways and the descriptive way to define what you're doing is a more or less easier way to do that than instead of making a programmatic setup and you have to program your build or something like that. I think that's the most important thing and makes it easy to use it. Yes, of course, there are some complaints about that which are completely fine and okay, but we are working on that to get a new version out there, and we are working at the moment on Apache Maven 4 at the moment.
Yeah. So you have Maven, the build tool, you have Maven, the repository. What I found out when I tried to submit a library into Maven, it's not a very easy step, but maybe that's a good thing to avoid too much clutter.
Yeah, that's a point where very often people complain about that. It's too complex to put something into Maven Central, it's called usually, or the central repository in the meantime. It had been changed a little bit. The most important thing, because you have to sign your artifacts with your GPG key, and that's very important to do that, and upload them and make that a reproducible process. And that makes it safe for other users to consume them, because you are not able to simply say, I don't want it to be that anymore in the central repository, just delete that. Because the consequences of that is that if you do that and just delete an artifact from the central repository, maybe other builds can fail simply. And we have some examples of these problems like in NPM and other things like that, or Python and other things like that. And I think this kind of step of security and things like that, the steps you have to go through, it's a little bit complicated. Yes, that's a point which is not good, I know, yes, but there are good documentation. You should do that once, and if you have to get used to it, that is fine, yes, but it gives you on the other side a very good security and a reliability, which is very important for your builds, and I think that is most important base for a build tool at all.
Yeah, and there is a process ongoing, I think, to have a new setup. So for first-time contributions, there's a new login procedure being developed, I think I've seen.
Yes, in the meantime, there are other setups doing at the moment that is supported by the Sonatype Corporation. Yes. Yeah, they're doing that all the time, and they are trying to, in a way, to simplify that process. Yeah, that's a good thing. And that takes time, of course, because we have millions of artifacts in central repositories, about 4 or 5 million artifacts in the meantime. That size is about 15, 20 terabytes in the meantime, and it's very large, to be honest. But it has grown over 15, 20 years in the meantime. And that takes some time, of course, to make the migration from the old process to the new one.
What I heard is that the very first server of that repository was under the desk of the Sonatype manager, I
I
think.
am not sure about that story, but I can really imagine that it could be true. Yeah,
I don't know if it's a legend or if it's true, but it's...
I can't confirm that, but it could be true. Yes, maybe it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you go to Maven, the build tool, so you're saying version 4.
Yeah.
What will be new, or what will we see as evolutions?
The most important thing is, because many people are complaining about the flexibility part, and also about the XML configuration. It's bloated and things like that you can do that. But there are some things we had to do in groundwork. We have to do some foundational work at first, and we needed to start to make a separation between the real use POM file, which in Maven 3 is always the same you use for building, and also you will publish that and you will use that for consumption. And there are two things combined here, which is usually not a good idea, to make a separation of concern here. That's much more better. Then we have to make a separation here. We call it a build POM. That's one thing, what you use and describe how you build your artifacts. And on the other hand, you have to publish something like that, which is consumed by the consumer. And there is a separation ongoing, which we have implemented over the time. In the meantime, that takes a long time, because have to clean up all the old code, because this code base is about 20 years old in the meantime, and to be updated and clean up and things like that. And that was the most important foundational work we had to do. In the meantime, that works with 4.0. We are at the moment, in these days, I read the mailing list yesterday, last time, we had all started voting for beta 1 at the moment, but it's closed because of a problem. So in the next days, there will be coming up another vote for that. And that is the most important thing. We had improvements for the reactor and many other things to improve that handling, version handling. I do a lecture on Wednesday about that, and others already did so. For example, on JCON conference, and others already talked about the details. But that is the most important thing, to do that and to get the door open to make it possible to do changes. For example, change the format if we would like to, or make it more easier to use, something like that.
Yeah. I like the XML structure.
To be honest, I like the XML as well, because interestingly, many people are complaining about that, because they say, why don't we use YAML or JSON or whatever? But the most important thing about XML is it works with all IDEs, code completion works, it is machinable, readable. And the problem is, what many people don't realize in the background is, this is not describing only for the human beings sitting in front of that, but it's also consumed by a lot of tools, like the IDEs, for example. Many other tools are working on that structure, analyzing tools, things like that. And that is the most important thing. And that's a huge amount of things. And you can't simply change that very simple. Or all the files which are in central repository, for example, they are XML, and they are in this old format, 4.0, for example. And if you would like to change that, you had to migrate the whole central repository. Whoever will do that work, there is no possibility. To be honest, in the history of Maven, there had been something like that already. We had the migration from Maven 1 to Maven 2, where already the format has changed. And based on the history I read, it was not a good idea in the end. One thing you should learn, do a mistake only once, for example.
learn from your mistakes.
Learn from your mistakes in the end. Yes, that's a very good thing. Yeah.
So Maven 4, when will we be able to use it fully?
You can already use it and test it. It's not completely released, general availability, of course, but in beta phase we are. I think we should have something end of this year, maybe beginning of next. The final release, would say, but it would be a great thing if you already download it and test it, so we can see, okay, there is a problem with a particular build or a particular Maven plugin or whatever. But it's very important to just try it out and see if it works. I would say it should work already. Many things. Of course, there are issues in there, but it's very important to report these issues. And that is the most important, which we wish from the community, that they are doing that and report the problems. Say, okay, we have one build that doesn't work with Maven 4, this and that, and report the details. That would be a very good thing for us, of course, and also for the community.
Yeah, I was back. Okay, that's a nice message to share.
Yep.
My name is Steve Poole. I work for Sonatype for a couple of years. I used to work for Red Hat for a bit, and then I was at IBM for 28 years. Scary number. I'm a JVM engineer. I'm a DevOps guy. I care about security. And right now, I'm the director of developer relations at Sonatype. So my passion, because it's very much what Sonatype cares about, is security, but software supply chain security. So not like API stuff, but getting developers to be more security conscious in how they create software and how they choose dependencies and all that sort of stuff. So we're trying to get people to do a better job because of all the bad things that are happening.
We just had Karl Heinz here.
Yeah.
We talked about Maven, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't think that most people are aware that Sonatype is behind the Maven repository.
Absolutely. The history is really strange because two guys, Jason Van Zyl and Brian Fox, created Maven the tool way back in the early days of Java. And it was there as a, make it easier to create builds. It was just there as a developer tool. But once you start talking about having an easy way of managing dependencies, you need to have somewhere to put the dependencies. So Brian and Jason started, I think it was actually Brian who had Maven Central under his desk.
So it's true. We were just wondering, is that true?
He says it that he did, but I don't think it was for very long. It didn't, because Apache were hosted it. I'm fuzzy on the details. I know that for most of its life, it was funded by public subscription, and then it just got too big. So now it's, I don't know, this year we had 1 trillion downloads, and it just continues to grow. So I know, long time, a couple of decades, Sonatype has been quietly running it. And that's Brian's passion because he's, an open source guy. And so that ethos is always around. And Maven Central, it's a great tool for us because we can say all the security software, the scanning software is used when you post to Maven Central, but that was never the intention. The intention was to give the community something. Mm-hmm. So which is, as you say, people got surprised when we reskinned it last year or the year before, and people saying, when did Sonatype buy Maven Central? It's like, no, we've been running it forever.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So your focus is a bit on security. So there are some horror stories we can say about from the JavaScript community where libraries got uploaded containing security issues and backdoors and are you sure that will not happen with Java libraries?
It's not impossible, but it's much harder. There are some really basic stuff. So, for instance, when you publish to Maven Central, you have to own the internet domain that matches the package that you're putting up. So that that requires proof of identity, and it requires you to spend some money to own a domain. And so that's one barrier. The second barrier is because you have to own the domain. You can't do what's called dependency confusion. So dependency confusion is where I publish something under one version and you publish the same package with, say, version 9999. And then when somebody comes to the latest version, they go latest, they don't get my latest, they get yours. You can't do that with Maven Central because you have to own the domain. Now, if somebody managed to take over domain ownership, theoretically it's possible. So you get that problem, which we don't have in general. The other one is typo spotting, where people, the name of the package they misspell. Again, if it's, com.apache.foo and you spell it com.apache.ofo, you couldn't register that because it's within this higher domain. So it's slightly harder, slightly easier to do that. But again, you have to buy a domain to do that. So we're pretty, from a Java point of view, we're pretty secure because of those things. And of course, also anything that gets pushed up to Maven Central goes through all the scanning tools that we produce. And I joined Sonatype because when I was looking at this, and again, these guys know what they're doing. So it's not a sales pitch to say I think that they have one of the best set of solutions going. So that means Maven's very safe. But if you look at the other communities, you look at JavaScript and Python and stuff like, all these things are possible because they don't really have the ownership mechanisms. So therefore, if I can register something and you can register something with the name slightly misspelled, somebody finds yours rather than mine, malware. Oh, and the other thing that makes this even worse is some of these packaging tools have exit to run and install, so they can run scripts. So there's another way for malware to get in. So with Java, you download something, nothing happens, you've just downloaded it. So there's a whole complete difference between the way the ecosystems work. And Java is, I don't know, by design, by default, safer. So, keep using Java.
Of course, with
Yes.
the Java community.
Oh, when I say Java, I mean Kotlin and all those things. Yes.
It's all these amazing technologies running on the GVM.
Yeah.
And it's more than just Java there.
Well, the last time there was a Wikipedia page that was kept update for a bit, and I think the top it got to was about 850 programming languages ported to Java.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't
You
know.
go, there aren't that many programming languages, but it was a very high number. Yes.
Yeah, and there are a lot of engineers developing a language just to find out how the GVM works.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Everybody should try and write their own language. It's not hard. You can get into the weeds, if you start going down Lexers and all those things, you can get very hard. It gets very hard. The hard bit is always with Java, with any programming language, is the conversion from source code to binary, to machine code. With Java, you don't have that problem. As long as you spit it out, you've got to learn bytecode and stuff like that. But as long as and that's not hard. Once you learn that stuff, you can create a language. Yeah.
We just had Otavio here. He's written a book. He has written a book about the bytecode. So if you want to understand how that works, there are great books about the topic and a lot of info.
Yeah,
online.
lots of Java developers, modern Java developers, current Java developers have lost track of how Java works, how JVMs work, and they might talk about GC and stuff like that. But the detail, I think, isn't particularly common knowledge. I'm doing a talk tomorrow about hidden security features of JVMs. A lot of stuff there that is mainstream, but not many people know about.
Yeah. But it's not only security, it's also like garbage collection.
Yeah.
You don't need to know it as a Java developer because the JVM takes care of it.
Yeah.
But it's good if you know how it works and what you can achieve with it.
And because it works so well, you don't notice. Those of us that have been brought up with Java know that there were the early days of GC getting in the way and people being, it becoming a meme that things stopped because GC was kicking in. And that's all gone. And that's thanks to hundreds of millions of dollars of investment from over the years from loads of people. People don't realize just how much money has been pushed into the JVMs that they use today.
If you go back to security, there's a whole discussion trend going on about SBOMs.
Yes.
Is that part of that security process, being aware of what is in your project?
Yes. In a nutshell, we're seeing more and more legislation that is requiring you to provide proof of what you're shipping. So an SBOM, the idea is that when I give you a product, even if it's a black box, you can't peer inside. I tell you what's inside it. And that SBOM, that bill of materials, is what can then be used to check against, have you got any vulnerabilities? So you would no longer rely on me to tell you, you could check it yourself. And that's the first step, the requirement on producing one, and then the understanding that it becomes a legal document that you have to give to somebody else so they can keep themselves safe. And that's what the industry is trying to do. The way to look at it is to look at the way that a lot of the governments think about these things. So most governments don't understand software. So you often get like a car manufacturing analogy. So the analogy is, if you shipped a car and you knowingly knew the air brakes didn't work, then you would be liable, right? You would be criminally liable, but you'd also be required to do a recall. So who's got that version. That's slightly harder for us. But if I told you that you've got a car and one of the parts is a malfunctioning airbag, you can do something about it. You're not waiting for me to tell you. right? So it's better joined up. But a lot of this, the SBOM is the first artifact. The requirement from all the governments is a lot more about much more rigor and control over the process, because security issues, mistakes and things happen from the moment you write software. So what they're trying to do, they will force us to do, is to move away from a lot of the handcrafted build systems to more rigorous controls.
Yeah, and an SBOM contains more than, so if I create a Java application and I have in my Maven POM file 5 dependencies in a version, there's actually probably more dependencies in there.
Yeah, well, so in theory, the SBOM I give you will contain all of the code that I've shipped you in a way that you could scan for, as in you could go look up for vulnerabilities. So it would be initial dependencies, transitive dependencies. In theory, and this has been discussed, is that it would also tell you what compiler you used and what plugins you used and what operating system you used, down to something that was trackable. Because in theory, with a compiler, I mean, compiler vulnerabilities are pretty rare, but they do happen. If somebody spotted that there was a compiler vulnerability and you knew that the product you've got was built with that compiler, you might want to do something about it. So the SBOM, bill of materials, is similar to what you get on the side of a jar in a supermarket, but with more information, because it isn't just ingredients, it's also where do the ingredients come from, what's their provenance. So the pressure is to create an accountancy chain, unforgeable, unbreakable accountancy chains. Everything involved in mutating the software from source code to delivery, packaging it, combining it, whatever, is in there, so that you can see that if it affected if it gets affected, big ask. We're a long way away from satisfying that, but governments, like all these people, start with something, and the first thing is the SBOM. Yeah.
Okay, so security is a hard topic.
Yes,
but it's actually pretty fascinating.
That's fabulous.
And a lot that you can learn from not only security, but also how Maven works, how applications get packaged and built and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of this stuff over the years anyway, because you use these things and you get curious. The thing for me was that a few years ago when I was IBM, I sort of got bored doing JVMs, right? I just doing it too long and I wanted to do something else. So I took over running IBM's European DevOps team. And I went into there with a developer's hat on, and I came out with a DevOps hat. And the difference for me was that I went in as a developer going, if I'm going to run a DevOps team, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to fix all this nonsense about updates and patches and stuff, because it gets in the way. Let's not do that. What I came out with was I now understood exactly why these things are important and why we have to get developers to do that, which has sort of started why I'm here, because developers are not security conscious, they're not security aware, and when they do get told to do things, they see it as this chore that they try to work around. Yet all we're trying to do is keep everybody safe. We haven't got through. We're getting there, but developers, because they're so often pushed about productivity, that the security becomes the second thing. But hopefully, especially with a lot of this legislation, there may be a little bit of kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
And it's so hard, but so important, because there are so many people on the wrong side, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
Who are trying whatever they can to get into applications, get into databases.
Yes. Yes. If you come to my workshop yesterday, we would have talked about that. The scary fact is that the estimate of the amount of money that it costs the world this year, which is a factor of how much of the money do they steal from you and the consequences of whatever they do to trash systems, for you to recover. The current estimate is about $9 trillion. And when you get $9 trillion, and it's such a big amount. So one of the analogies we've got is that if that was a GDP number, cybercrime will be the third largest country in the world. And the way things are going, by 2025, 2026, it could be, by GDP, the number one country in the world. And it still doesn't compute. So the one I use in the UK, we just started using, is in 2016, when cybercrime was about the same as the drug trading value, you could buy 2 million houses in the UK for the money that they were saying. Now, you can buy 85% of all the houses in the UK. You know, there are millions of them. So the amount of money is ridiculous. And because it's so easy to do, it's just growing and growing, which is why developers are key to this, because they're the ones that make the first choices about what software comes in. They're the ones that should worry about upgrades. And if we could get them to realize how much control they have in keeping us safe, because it starts with them, we don't want to be in this position of having people with big sticks every time going, you're using a vulnerable thing, update it. We want Java developers to be making better choices so that happens less often. So they have to do that, because if you get hacked, I don't know. See, if you're a small company, 50% chance of going out of business. Bigger companies, less, but it's still a horrific attack. And of course, we're moving now also from it being attacks of money. We're seeing much more cyber warfare type attacks, which is much more nation states using the same tools, and they have different agendas. And you're looking at people not just say stealing data, you're also seeing people adding data. You know, if you're a credit card company, or even if you're just a Amazon, if somebody can compromise you and insert new accounts and get bypassed any validation process that you've got, that's really valuable. They can then start sending all your goods to somebody, or whatever. So and the thing is that the bad guys are much more incented to do all this. They're much more thoughtful. And if I have one takeaway from all this, is like, don't think this is some 15-year-old guy in his bedroom. These are professional groups of developers, well paid, very motivated, with criminal intent.
Yeah, there are businesses, but
absolutely
somewhere hidden.
Yeah.
With staff and big groups of developers really working on these hacks.
Yeah. I mean, there's not as many as you think, but there are enough of them to want to do this. Enough of them for all the governments to realize that they have to do something about it. And the money is a big thing for them, but the realization that these weapons are also weapons of war and can be used against you now. You can see what's happening. Although you've got nation states going, we have to prevent this. They can't attack us. But also they're going, how do we use this stuff to attack them? So, it's a new world.
It's a scary message, but it's one we have to bring.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Next to security, we as developers are responsible for the creation of readable and maintainable code. I talked about the subject with the following guests: Miro Wengner, Marit van Dijk, and Hinse Schuur.
Hey, my name is Miro Wengner, and I am here for conference, the first to kind of meet the friends, which I don't have a time normally because my busy schedule, and also to get to know what is happening in a Java world. To keep updated.
And are you a speaker yourself?
Yes, I'm speaking. I have a talk here, and I forgot the name.
What is the topic?
No, the topic, how to boost the delivery stream with the discipline engineering, because I think based on the project I'm involved in, and I'm trying to help the customers, I figured out that the struggles are in the communication mainly. It kind of also involves the level of empathy. The people are not able at a certain point to communicate, and it's not only about the developers. It's also, everyone knows the convey law, right? So the product, actually the application we produce, is kind of reflection how the company communicates. But it's just partially true. I mean, if you don't have the language, how you can share your ideas, or just how you can object against the decision, so it's very hard. It may turn into the direction you don't want to. And yes,
but I once heard about someone who decided to become a programmer. He did that because he didn't want to speak to people. He wanted to be behind the computer, but actually I think that's the biggest mistake as a developer, is that you don't want to speak to people. That's probably the biggest part of your job, is find out what people really want. What is the problem they want you to solve?
I mean, yes, I agree. I mean, it could be valid in the past, right? So this is also about the talk. I will be touching this topic. In the past, there was simply the system were not that complex, and it allowed us as a developers to provide really isolated solutions. Yeah, but these times are gone, so they will never come back. So right now we are running the clusters,
Mhm.
we are running VMs, so everything is basically spread around in the clouds. Yeah, sometimes it's raining.
Yeah.
So, but in that case, what does it mean is you have to actually communicate your result. You need to find a language that you can share with your peers, your achievements, or
Mhm.
your struggles. Yeah,
So it's communicating with the people who are
yeah,
using your application, but also within your team,
yes,
with your testers, with the
yes,
people who need to deploy it.
yes.
So indeed we are in a completely different software world than
Yeah.
some years ago.
Yes, of course, completely. And also, there's a very nice. Also, the Java is a completely different level. I right now recently when I just being sitting in the train, I read some article like or just maybe it was a tweet that with the new release 20 Java 23, it becomes 8 layers closer to Scala. Yeah, the Java. But I think it is a partial true. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, the Java is a it will be still the first one JVM language. Scala, it brought some very nice features that been required
Mm.
by the community at that time. But I mean, if you take a look on the trends, how the company been able to evolve, if the Java would be at the level like a Scala at that time, just it will be too early
Mm.
because the company and project will be not able to kind of use
Mhm.
and utilize all these features.
Yeah, that's a bit what we heard already in the previous podcast. Is Java evolved slowly,
Mhm.
so it became a stable system
Yeah.
where a lot of companies depend on.
Yes.
And now with the new age, we have a faster evolving Java. So we're entering a new era where people can take pride in the new type of Java that we have now. And so people who are Kotlin fans, actually they're also running on the
Yes.
JVM. So it's all the same base.
Yeah, I think, well, I have experience. I have been also having the project with the Kotlin. It's a nice language. Yeah, I have no doubt. I haven't
Mhm.
no here. Everything that is running on JVM, I love. Yeah, groovy. So yeah, it has. Oh, everything has a plus minus. Yeah, there has been taken some compromises, and the Kotlin is the same. Yeah, the Java a part of it, it's precisely designed to achieve this type safety
Mhm.
all way around. So no shortcuts. Yeah. And this is very hard to make. Like
Mhm.
my respect to the language designers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those languages like Scala or Kotlin and so they just took a shortcut. They took the glows lying on the floor.
Mhm.
Yeah. And Java was not able. Yeah. But it was able to evolve, and the designers were able to think through things how it will be works, and therefore, I mean, Java has done the dramatic like improvements over the past year, and this 6 months cadency is really helpful.
Yeah.
And it won't be Scala. I think, just to be honest, yeah, I'm running right now a Scala project, very big one, and it's doing a lot of mathematics here. So, and I think we are right now entering the phase, like in the next month, where maybe it will be possible with the new features even to switch to without the significant like refactoring and so on to Java. Yeah, because at the end, my project is based really on mathematics and probabilistic. Yeah, and as I see the transformation we need to apply on the code, so I have like Scala has these features, but the Java is not so far.
Yeah.
And never been. So that's it. So
But it's all in the GVM world, so
Yes,
we're all
exactly.
happy with it.
no, my point was that just complain. Sometimes people complains that Java doesn't have these features. Yeah,
Mhm.
but the question is, do you really need
them,
these
yeah.
features?
Yeah.
Because actually, if you are the seller or you owner of the product, you need to maintain it. Any part of the code you need to maintain, and it becomes very significant difficult if you have just the collection of new features or cool feature usage which you don't understand after the week.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
Okay.
I'm Marit van Dijk. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains, and I'm speaking here today, or rather, I spoke this morning, and my talk was called Reading Code, and it's about reading code and the importance of reading code, and also why we should practice reading code, because as developers, we spend more time reading and trying to understand existing code than we do writing code, but we hardly ever practice reading code as a skill. We spend a lot of time practicing writing code, but not reading code. And then, sometimes we need that skill more to understand existing code that we're working with. So my talk is about how can we practice reading code and using structured exercises and Code Reading Club, which was created by Feline Hermans, a professor of computer science education in the Netherlands, and a few other people. And they started doing exercises and practicing reading code, and they've shared some of their resources with people so that people can either join their online events or start their own clubs. And of course, I'm talking about how our IDE can help us when we are reading code in our IDE, from familiarizing ourselves with a project or looking at a particular section of the code and searching and navigating our code base, to getting hints from the IDE and finding out what a particular piece of code does.
So is it the bad joke that you should write code for a psychopath who will take over your code later and will murder you if he doesn't understand it?
I really, really dislike that joke.
It's a really bad
because
joke.
I would prefer to not have any psychopaths that work in
In your code?
my team, in my code, near my code, or near me. So I would prefer to think of it as writing code as if it will be maintained by someone that you like, including your future self,
Including your future self.
assuming that you like yourself. But, hopefully we do. So assume that it will be maintained by people that you actually like, and make it easier for them to maintain your code.
And especially yourself.
Especially yourself. And I mean, we all know what it's like reading code that was written by someone else, including your past self, because you won't exactly remember what
No.
you were thinking. So,
And is it only about having a good method name, or is it making your code not complex?
it's multiple things. So I'm actually my talk is not about writing readable code, but it's explicitly about reading code that is.
Exists.
And I think, as we have a lot of opinions on what makes good code, there are people who've written books on what makes good code. And yes, there is, but there's research on what makes good variable names or what makes good code. And again, Feline Hermans has written a book called The Programmer's Brain, where she's also talking about, what makes good naming or good variable names, but based on research. So not opinions on it should be this, but research has shown that this works better. So I really like her book in that sense. But it's also more about, you encounter code. The code is what it is. You might write it differently now because you know more than I've literally rewritten code that I wrote myself 6 months ago because I learned more about the language that we were working with, which was Kotlin. We used Kotlin at my previous company. So, my first Kotlin was writing Java in Kotlin. And then as we learned more Kotlin and more idiomatic Kotlin, going back to that code and then making it more idiomatic. It wasn't because I was aiming to write bad code originally, but I had learned new things, so I could apply the things that I learned to that code. And the same might be true for the domain that you're working with. As you get better understanding of the business domain, you are able to use better naming for things or apply better logic to it and clean out some of the bugs that might have been in your thinking and therefore might also end up in your code. So it's all of those things.
It's evolving. You
Yes.
as a person evolve, your knowledge evolves.
And also the ecosystem evolves. So new libraries might pop up that give you functionality that you need, or the style might change. The Java language evolves continuously, and there are new patterns that we can use to make our code, less verbose, less ceremonial, easier to read as well.
Okay.
So yeah, keeping up with everything that involves, including ourselves.
And if we talk about evolutions, we have ChatGPT, which is now there as the AI assistant, for instance, in IntelliJIDEA. Will that help us to read code or understand code?
Yes, so I also showed some JetBrains AI assistant features that can help you to understand code. One of the things is there's obviously an option to chat with AI assistants, so you can ask questions and they can be generic, like how do I do a quick sort, or they can be specific, like how do I add a controller, and if you're in a Spring project it will suggest a Spring controller to you, or you can even ask it questions about your project. Because it's connected with the IDE and it can do callbacks to the IDE and get that information for you. It doesn't automatically load the entire project as context, but it does have some information on the abstract syntax tree of the project or the program structure interface. So what type of dependencies you're using, etc. And it uses that in the context, but it can also call back to the IDE to get more information. So that is one way that you can interact with your project through AI Assistant. We also have some AI actions that you can use in the editor, including explain code, where it will open the chat and explain the selected piece of code. You can write documentation. Sometimes that's a good way to get a quick summary of what a method does. You can use it to find problems or suggest refactoring, which can also help you. That's going more towards judging and improving the code, but it can help you understand, like, how does it work? Are there any problems in this code that I want to be aware of before I touch this code and now it's mine?
Yeah.
So
it's an extra tool. We already discussed SonarLint before, which is also, it's not AI, but it also says this is wrong with your code, or you should make this differently. So that's
this is a potential bug pattern, So I mean, obviously IntelliJIDEA has inspections that we've had for years and years, which will suggest things that you could change about your code to make it more robust or performant, or change the style to new Java versions. We also have a scanning tool called Codana, where you can run those same inspections, but in your CI/CD or in your CI server. So if not everybody on the team is using IntelliJ, but you want to make sure that you run the inspections, you can use Codana. And then AI Assistant is an additional tool on top of all of that you can use to interact with your code. And there are, apart from the chat and the AI actions in the editor, there are additional AI actions throughout the IDE. Obviously, being a tooling company, we're working very hard on integrating it into the IDE. So another feature that I really, really like is to explain this commit to me, because if you go to the commit history, sometimes you're working on a piece of code and you're like, why is it like this? Or, hey, I thought it was different. When was it changed? So you can go to your commit history and find that commit to see, at least the commit message, which will hopefully not only tell you what, because you can see that in the code, but also why, because you can't see that in the code. And you can look at the diff, obviously, to see what exactly was changed in the code, but you can now also ask AI Assistant, explain this commit to me, and it will give you a summary of what was changed in that commit, or if you select multiple commits, what was changed in a few commits. Yes.
Was that also in your talk?
Yes, I did show that in my talk.
So if the recording is available...
Yes, please watch that and let us know what you think.
So my name is Hinse Schuur, and I'm here at JCON initially to give a talk, but I'm also enjoying the other talks I can watch and meet people. It's always great.
You just left the black box room, I guess?
No, I didn't.
No, I thought you were part of those people.
No,
so what was the talk you just visited?
It was about ethics, being ethical as a developer, so thinking about how do you say it? Difference between privacy and security. They're like in the same area, but different.
Yeah, but different indeed.
So that was a good refresher, I'd say.
We are working with Foojay on a book about being a sustainable developer.
Okay.
I think that's a bit the same topic.
Yeah.
You can be sustainable in good to people, but also good to the economy, ecology. So having a service which doesn't consume too much energy, was that also part of the talk?
No, it was
really
more about people ethics.
people. GDPR. Probably.
That was not mentioned.
That
but
was not mentioned.
No, it was more about, I'd say, think about ethics and not really about following the law.
Yeah.
That also follows, of course, if you try to do that.
Yeah.
But
Be a good developer by just thinking about things before implementing them.
Yeah.
So you're also a speaker. What's the talk you will give or already gave? I don't know.
I already did my talk.
Okay.
It was this morning. It was about code reviews. So some best practices, what you should and what you shouldn't do with a code review.
Okay, which is a hot topic and a difficult topic, I guess, for a lot of companies. What is a good merge request? A small one with unit tests or a big one refactoring the whole code?
Yeah, I should of course say it depends, right?
Yes.
So I think that there are a couple of key points, I think, for doing good code reviews. I think the first one is to agree with the team why you do code reviews. Because I see a lot of teams that some people say no, I only go for the bugs, and other people nitpick on every, I don't know, style change and refactoring. So in general, I think that's the most important part, that you know why you do the code reviews. Another one is try to do one thing at a time. So you can still do one refactor which touches a lot of code just because it's used a lot of times. And maybe the pull request is big, but it's conceptually one change. So if you try to stick to conceptually one change, that will really help. Also, like code formatting is also, I would say, a famous thing for touching a lot of lines. So if you change one code style rule and you reformat the code, then it's like, I don't know, the whole code base has been changed, while essentially it's only like change the braces from end of line to new line. So then for review, I would say review the code style and then approve. So,
and I think if your company is big enough, or at least you should try to automate this kind of stuff, I guess. Formatting.
Yes, yeah. So one of the, how do you say it, one of the points I had in my presentation was, I don't want to see any style comments. If there's a style comment, you should automate it. Like if it's not an automatable style check, then it's like a matter of taste.
Yeah.
You cannot really like block a pull request on it. That would not be nice. And of course, automate the boring parts as much as possible so that you can use human power to do the real valuable reviews. Same with like security checks. There are automated security checks you can run. Try to use them.
Yeah. If you say do one change at a time, is it also important to have a discussion about trunk-based versus branches? Can that be an issue in a good code review process?
I think you should decide on a branching strategy apart from the code reviews. And then the code review should follow that guideline that you have in the team. So I would say it's like a team decision or maybe a company decision on a branching strategy. Some can have some advantage over others. And I suggested for sometimes use feature branches if you have a really big thing which requires both refactoring and a lot of code to be added and maybe some other things. Then you could opt for a feature branch to prevent one big merge request. So you can do small pull request to that feature branch, and then at the end you don't have to do the whole feature branch review, because every part is already reviewed.
Oh, that's the idea. So you stay within your feature branch, but you still do pull requests to have to review step by step.
Correct. Yeah. But it's kind of like a workaround, but because I would prefer to merge to the let's say main branch, so that everybody can profit from a refactor, for example. So if you change the design and you integrate early, but sometimes that's too difficult or not viable, and then a feature branch could help.
But again, software, it depends.
Yeah, of course.
I think it also depends on the size of your team and the size of your application. If you can have multiple feature branches.
True. Yeah. And also the experience of the team. Also,
to be able to handle that kind of big changes. We are here with a lot of Java community people.
True.
Do you mingle? Do you see a lot of people you know or only know from Twitter and other things and get in contact?
Maybe not a lot, because typically I don't make contact quite easily, or it's improving, but still working on that skill. But the more people you know, the easier it gets to get to know new people, because other people know other people, and then it spreads.
Yeah. You're from the Netherlands.
Correct.
There are a lot of JUCs in the Netherlands. Do you participate in those?
Depends on how you call participate.
Or
I
attend?
I attend. I try to attend the Utrecht JUC meetings like every other time. So it's like once every 2 months or so, something like that. And occasionally I go to other meetups in the Netherlands if they're close by.
You spoke here. How is that journey as a speaker? Did you start at JUCs, or did you just submit to a conference and got accepted?
I started out on a speaker mentoring program from the Utrecht JUC. Back then it was Brian Vermeer who was the mentor for the speaker program. And then I got a talk on the Utrecht JUC. And then I sent in a proposal for the JFOL conference in the Netherlands. That one got accepted. But since then, I didn't do that much conferences. It was JavaLand last year. And now,
is that a good approach, you think, to grow through a JUC and then do a tryout? Let's call it like that. A tryout at a smaller event like a JUC?
I don't know. I'm not that experienced, as in I didn't try the other options. For me, the speaker mentoring program helped, both in, let's say, technique, writing for call for papers, but also getting to know other people, and then starting with presenting in a JUC. That made the bar a bit lower to start.
Yeah. That's it for this episode of the Foojay Podcast and my overview of the JCON interviews. In the next one, you'll hear Ottavio Santana, Arjan Thames, Ondro Mihaly, Buhaki Cindy and Patrick Baumgartner about persistence, Jakarta EE, a pet project with Telegram, and much more. See you next week.
Give me a foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.